I've been coding for more than 2 decades now, and in these 2 decades, I have reviewed hundreds of thousands of lines of code. I have written thousands of lines of code myself in more than half a dozen programming languages. So in this video, I wanted to highlight that if I had absolutely no knowledge about programming, and if I were to start over from scratch in today's world, what advice would I give to myself based on all these years of experience? And I'm making this video with the hope that if you are that person who is starting to learn to program, all the tips and tricks I share in this video would be useful to you. So let's jump right in. The very first advice I'll give to myself would be that rely heavily on the AI tools which are available in today's world. The AI tools which are currently available like ChatGPT and Google Gemini, they have made the process of learning programming much more easier than it was before. So the very first advice which I'll give is that try to learn and get yourself familiarized with these tools. Their biggest advantage is that now you do not need a pro on your side to help you get stuck if you run into an error or are unable to debug the code or are unable to understand a code which you have found somewhere online. With the right prompts, you can easily use these AI tools to help you get stuck with situations like these. The best part is that learning the right prompts to help you on these scenarios, it takes 10 minutes, but it makes the process of learning programming at least 10 times easier. So do some upfront investment of time and try to learn how to write the proper prompts for these tools so that whenever you get stuck while learning programming, you can ask for help using these tools. I've created a separate video on all the prompts which I think are useful for learning programming. I'll share the link in the description below. The next advice which I'll give is that for learning programming, you have to start with learning one programming language. Now, there are dozens of programming languages out there, so be very strategic in terms of deciding what programming language you should be learning as your first programming language. The good thing is that once you learn any one programming language, the process of learning another one isn't very cumbersome. A lot of learnings which you acquire while learning the first programming language translate very easily to learning the second one. So don't overthink it a lot, but be strategic in making the decision of deciding what that first programming language should be. Some consideration for deciding on that first programming language is definitely it should be easy to write, and the syntax should be easy and English-like, and it should have good current demand, and also the demand in the future looks very promising. Python usually checks all these boxes, so if you do not have any preference in mind, I would suggest that you start with Python programming, but if you have any other choice, just make sure that you are checking all these boxes while making that decision. The next tip which I'll have is that in the very beginning, try to learn how to debug a code if you get into some error or issue. A lot of people, especially the newcomers, get disappointed when they see an error on the code they are running. But the reality is that even for experienced software engineers, 20% of their time goes into writing new code, and about 80% of their time goes into debugging and resolving errors in the existing code. So this is a very crucial skill to develop on how to debug a code when it is giving some problem. Some advice which I would have for you is that as you are starting to write code yourself, try to write at most 2 to 3 lines of code and then run and then see what the output is. If you write a bunch of lines of code and then it starts throwing error, you'll have absolutely no clue where the error happened. But if you run the code line by line, then whenever the code breaks, you'll get an understanding of why it broke. Also, try to use some good debugger. There are some debuggers online, but I would suggest that you use some good IDE where you run the code, and every good IDE has a debugger component in it. A lot of people ignore it as a useless feature, but I think that's the most crucial feature which you should be learning how to use. Because when you learn how to use a debugger, it shows you how the code progresses from line to line, how the variable values are updated. And once you see all that thing visually, it gives you a lot of understanding of how the code is working. And as I said before, there are many AI tools available, so try to learn how to use them effectively. Also, Stack Overflow is very rich resource in terms of finding the code. The next advice which I'll have is that understand that about 20% of the commands of a programming language is all you need to get started. So don't spend months in terms of trying to learn all the commands available for the programming language you're trying to learn. just ask ChatGPT or some experienced friend, hey, what are the top 20% commands which most frequently get used? And once you have that, then just document them somewhere and try to write the code with just using those commands. You'll be amazed on how complex codes you can write with just a minimum set of commands. And when you really get stuck and you're unable to perform a particular functionality using the commands you've already learned, then branch out and try to find a new command which can help you fulfill that requirement. So if you grow in that way by learning some very basics in the beginning and then trying to build and only learning on need basis, your learning would be much more to the point and will save you a lot of time. The fifth advice which I'll have is that as you are learning these programming languages, try to develop your own cheat sheet, a note where you can add all the commands you're using and how you're using. So some snippets of codes, because you'll be amazed on how much new code you write is basically what you have written before. So if you keep a repository of what are the useful commands you have used and how you have used them somewhere which is easily accessible, that will make your process of writing new code much more easier. Of course, you can go back and see what your notebooks or command codes are, but as you are into your coding journey for months, you'll see that your codes, it's scattered in multiple places and it's too difficult to find something useful. So anything new which you learn or write, try to put it in a single cheat sheet. It should be accessible online so that even if you are on a different computer, you can access it. It should be searchable so that if you're planning to see, okay, how did I use that particular command, you can just control and find. And once everything new you learn keeps going into that will make your process of writing new code much more easier, because you can just go back to your cheat sheet and try to see, okay, how did I use that command, and just start copying it. I know these are a lot of tips to wrap your head around, but if there is one main thing you want to take away from this video, is learn properly how to use AI tools to help you learn programming languages much more easier. And as I said before, I've created a separate video with all the prompts on how to effectively use these AI tools. The link is right here, so please check it out. It will explain in detail that how to properly use ChatGPT to learn a programming language. I hope you'll like this video very much. Thank you so much for watching.